She stood in the dim glow of the city lights, her breath trembling in the icy air, clutching her purse like it was her last shield against the world. Her voice quivered as she asked the question that carried the weight of a lifetime of pain. "Will you pretend to love me tonight?" The man standing across from her, tall, calm, and cloaked in quiet strength, didn't flinch. His answer wasn't rehearsed, nor was it safe. It was dangerous, real, and it would change everything. "I'll love you for real," he whispered, a promise cutting through the darkness like a blade. That night their paths collided, not by fate, but by fear. A young woman running from a truth too dark to bear, and a man marked by a world that never wanted him to stand tall. Their story wasn't supposed to happen, yet it unfolded like a storm, relentless, heartbreaking, and unforgettable. The night was cold, and the city pulsed with its usual rhythm of honking horns and flickering neon lights. Crowds moved past each, other with practiced indifference, their faces illuminated briefly by headlights before fading into anonymity. This was downtown Chicago, a place where dreams were built sky high, but humanity was often buried beneath concrete and glass. Alina. Mason had lived here all her life, but tonight the streets felt foreign. She was 27, a white woman raised in privilege but now stripped bare of every illusion. Her high heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she walked, her steps hurried, her breath uneven. Behind her designer coat and flawless makeup was a woman unraveling, chasing safety but running from a world that seemed determined to devour her. Alina's childhood was pristine in every way society measures worth. She'd grown up in a sprawling suburban home, the only daughter of a prominent attorney and a mother who played the perfect socialite. Her life was an endless cycle of ballet recitals, private schools, and country club dinners. And yet, beneath that polished surface, she'd always felt like a stranger in her own home. Her parents measured her worth in grades, appearances, and accolades, never asking who she wanted to be. By her mid-20s, Alina was exhausted, tired of existing in a glass box built by her parents' expectations. When she left their mansion at ITT 22, it wasn't rebellion, it was survival. But she quickly discovered that the world outside wasn't kinder. She landed a job as a marketing associate at a tech startup, hoping for independence. Instead, she found herself trapped in a cycle of toxic workplaces, exploitative relationships, and friends who saw her as a trophy, not a person. Slowly, the glossy veneer of her life cracked. She began to drown, not in poverty, but in loneliness, in disillusionment, in the crushing weight of living a life that wasn't hers. And then came tonight. She had left a dinner party early, her fiancé's voice still echoing in her head. "You're worthless without me, you know that, right?" The words weren't new. His cruelty was predictable, dressed in expensive suits and hidden behind charming smiles. But tonight they cut deeper because she'd finally admitted to herself that she believed him. Her body moved on autopilot as she wandered through unfamiliar streets, seeking refuge. She had nowhere to go, no one to call. Her friends would gossip, not comfort. Her parents would shame her for ruining her engagement. And the man she thought she loved had made it clear that her pain was his entertainment. As she stopped, beneath a flickering street lamp, the sharp sting of tears blurred her vision. That's when she noticed him. Marcus Hale wasn't supposed to be there either. He had grown up in the South Side, far from these polished streets, and every step he took in neighborhoods like this came with the weight of eyes that watched him with suspicion. Marcus was 32, a black man whose life had been defined by resilience. Broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, and carrying himself with a quiet dignity, he didn't blend in. He never could. He was a musician by passion, a construction worker by necessity. His hands were calloused from years of labor, but his spirit had been shaped by something far harsher, the constant hum of systemic racism that dictated where he could walk, how he could speak, and what doors were closed before he even reached them. Marcus had learned young that the world didn't want him to dream. At 10, he was accused of shoplifting because he lingered too long at a store window. At 15, he was stopped and frisked for matching a description. At 21, he was handcuffed, on his way home from a late shift because his car looked stolen. No charges, no apologies. Just another reminder that being a black man in America meant being guilty until proven otherwise. But Marcus wasn't bitter, not outwardly. He had his music, his faith, and an inner strength that no amount of cruelty could extinguish. Tonight, though he was exhausted, he'd finished a 12-hour shift, his body aching as he cut through downtown to catch a late train. He didn't expect to meet anyone's eyes, let alone stop for a stranger. But then he saw her, a young woman in an elegant coat, standing frozen under a flickering street lamp, her face streaked with tears. She looked lost, not just physically, but spiritually, like someone whose soul had been beaten into silence. Something about that image tugged at him. Against every instinct to mind his own business, he slowed his steps. "Miss, you okay?" His voice was deep, steady but careful. Years of navigating white spaces had taught him that his presence could be seen as a threat. "Before a kindness?" Alina flinched at the sound of his voice, then turned. Her eyes, wide and glassy, met his. She should have been afraid. This was a stranger, a man who looked nothing like the world she came from. And yet, in that moment, she felt safer with him than she had in years. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm not okay." Something shifted between them then. Marcus didn't ask for details. He didn't judge her makeup-streaked face or trembling hands. He simply nodded and stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance, his body language calm and open. "You want to sit for a minute? There's a bench right over there." She nodded wordlessly, following him like a lost child. They sat beneath the glow of the street lamp, the world around them a blur of rushing cars and strangers who didn't care. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a reprieve. Finally, Alina broke it. I don't want to be alone tonight." Marcus looked at her, his dark eyes soft but searching. "You want company, or you want someone to care?" Her breath hitched at the question, and she felt the tears well up again. She wanted both. She wanted someone to care, truly care, even if it was just for one night. That's when the words slipped from her mouth, a plea born of desperation. "Will, you pretend to love me tonight?" Marcus didn't laugh. He didn't look shocked or uncomfortable. He simply held her gaze, his expression unreadable, but not unkind. "No," he said quietly. Alina's heart sank. She turned away, humiliated. "I won't pretend," Marcus continued, his voice low but firm. "I'll love you for real." The words hit her like a lifeline. She didn't know this man, yet his voice carried a conviction she hadn't heard in years. And for the first time that night, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't beyond saving. The city around them seemed to blur as Marcus's words settled between them like a fragile, glowing ember. "I'll love you for real." It was such a simple sentence, but Alina felt it reverberate through her like a thunderclap. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to her with such quiet sincerity, without expecting something in return. She studied him cautiously, her fingers tightening around her purse. The man sitting beside her was a stranger, yet there was something disarming about him. His posture was relaxed, but his presence carried a gravity that commanded attention. He wasn't like the men she knew, the ones with expensive suits, manicured smiles, and empty promises. Marcus didn't seem to be selling anything, least of all himself. Alina's voice was small, hesitant. "You don't even know me." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Do I need to? You look like someone who's been fighting a war all alone. I know what that feels like." His words pierced her carefully built armor. For years, she'd hidden her pain behind designer clothes and curated Instagram posts. People saw her as confident, untouchable, a woman who had it all. No one had ever looked at her and seen the truth, that she was breaking. Alina blinked rapidly, willing away tears. I don't want to burden anyone with my problems." Marcus gave a low chuckle, not mocking but warm. "You think talking is a burden? Trust me, silence weighs a lot more." The bench creaked as he shifted, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to tell me everything. Just start with why. You're out here alone at midnight, crying under a streetlight. That's usually not how a good night ends." Alina hesitated. No one had ever asked her that question without judgment. For a moment, she considered brushing him off, offering some casual excuse. But something about his presence, the calm in his voice, the quiet strength in his posture, made her want to open up. "My fiancé," she whispered. We fought." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Bad one?" Her laugh was bitter, hollow. "A bad one would be an improvement. It's more like, he reminds me every day that I'm lucky he puts up with me." And I guess I believed him. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt, just listened. "He says I'm worthless," she continued, her voice cracking. "That I don't deserve him. And tonight I started to think maybe he's right." Marcus turned to face her fully, his dark eyes steady but fierce. "He's wrong." The certainty in his tone startled her. "You don't even know me," she repeated softly, this time almost as a challenge. "I don't need to," Marcus replied, his voice low but firm. "I know what it feels like to be told you're nothing. I know what it feels like to believe it. And I know it's a lie." For a moment, Alina couldn't speak. She stared at him, her heart pounding. His words felt like sunlight breaking through clouds she didn't even realize she'd been living under. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked finally. Marcus shrugged lightly. "Because someone was kind to me once when I didn't deserve it. I figure the world needs more of that." His answer was so simple, so unassuming, that it nearly broke her. She dropped her gaze, staring at her hands as a tear slipped down her cheek. Marcus noticed but didn't comment. He'd learned long ago that sometimes silence was the greatest kindness. They sat like that for a while, the hum of the city around them fading into background noise. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his tone gentle but serious. "Where are you supposed to be tonight?" Alina hesitated. "Home. But I don't want to go back there." He nodded slowly, not pressing her. "You got any friends you can stay with?" She shook her head. "Not really. They're all his friends too. I don't trust them." Marcus leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "All right, then you're staying with me." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "What?" "Relax," Marcus said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just don't think you should be out here alone tonight. You're not safe." Alina's instinctive fear battled with an equally instinctive trust. Every warning she'd ever been given about strangers, about men, flashed in her mind. And yet, something about Marcus felt safe. Safer than her own home. Safer than the man who claimed to love her. Still, her voice trembled. "Why would you do that for me?" Marcus looked at her like the answer was obvious. "Because I know what it's like to need someone, and I don't want you to feel like nobody cares. Even if I'm a stranger, tonight, I care." Something inside her cracked, open at those words. She swallowed hard, nodding. Okay. Marcus lived in a small apartment on the south side, a place Alina had never ventured. The cab ride there was quiet, tense, but not uncomfortable. Alina stared out the window, clutching her purse, while Marcus sat beside her with a calm stillness. That seemed to ground her. When they arrived, she was surprised by how neat his place was. The apartment was modest, worn furniture, plain walls, but it was warm, cozy, and smelled faintly of cedarwood and laundry detergent. Make yourself. At home, Marcus said, setting his keys on the counter. You want some tea? Coffee? Tea would be nice, she murmured, still feeling out of place. Marcus moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, and Alina took a seat on the couch, her eyes scanning the space. There were framed photos on a small shelf, Marcus with an older woman she assumed was his mother, a younger boy who might be his brother, and a few candid shots of him playing guitar at what looked like a small club. You play? She asked softly, nodding toward the photos. Marcus glanced over his shoulder, a small smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, music's been my escape since I was a kid. Are you good? He chuckled. Depends who you ask. My mama says I'm the next Marvin Gaye. Record labels, well, they're not calling just yet. Alina smiled faintly for the first time that night. There was something comforting about his humility, his ability to joke even in the midst of her pain. As the night wore on, they talked more. Marcus didn't pry, but he asked questions that showed he cared. Not just about what had happened tonight, but about who she was. And for the first time in years, Alina found herself opening up. She told him about growing up in a wealthy but loveless home, about her parents' obsession with appearances, about feeling invisible even in a room full of people who claimed to love her. She confessed how she'd fallen for her fiancé because he was charming and attentive at first, only to realize too late that he was controlling, manipulative, and cruel. Marcus listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. When she finally fell silent, drained from the weight of her own story, he spoke softly. You know, love isn't supposed to hurt like that. Her throat tightened. I don't even know what real love feels like. Marcus leaned forward, his gaze steady. Then maybe it's time you found out. Alina's heart skipped a beat. His words weren't flirtatious. They carried a sincerity that disarmed her. She felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was past 2 a.m. when Marcus finally handed her a blanket and pointed to the couch. You take the bed, he said firmly. She shook her head. No, I can't. Not a debate, he interrupted with a half smile. You've had a rough night. Get some real rest. Alina hesitated, then nodded. Too exhausted to argue. She disappeared into his bedroom, the scent of clean linen enveloping her as she crawled into the bed. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Marcus stayed awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't planned any of this, but something about Alina's brokenness had called to him, like a song he couldn't ignore. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. Tonight, she wasn't alone. The night felt heavy, the kind of heavy that pressed against windows and wrapped around the building like a storm waiting to break. Alina sat curled up in the far corner of Marcus's couch, a blanket draped over her knees, her fingers trembling as they clutched a mug of tea. She was exhausted, yet sleep eluded her. Her mind replayed every cruel word, every betrayal, every instance in her life where she'd felt invisible. And then, through the darkness, a thought emerged. A thought so strange it startled her. Maybe this man, this stranger, might just be the beginning of a new story. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the room. Alina stirred, the remnants of last night's exhaustion still clinging to her. She blinked a few times, trying to adjust to the light, and then remembered where she was. Marcus was in the kitchen, humming softly as he prepared breakfast. The smell of coffee and something sweet, pancakes, she realized, drifted through the apartment. For a moment, Alina just watched him, unsure if this was real or a dream. "You're up," Marcus said without looking up. "Good. I made coffee. And pancakes. Hope you like them." Alina managed a small, hesitant smile. "Thank you," he shrugged, flipping a pancake with casual ease. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't tasted them." She laughed lightly, the sound rusty from disuse. Something about this simple morning, sunlight, food, safety, felt revolutionary. She hadn't experienced a morning like this in years, where someone treated her kindly without expectation or judgment. Sitting at the small kitchen table, she took a sip of coffee. Warmth spread through her chest, and for the first time in a long time, Alina felt okay. Not healed, not fixed, but okay. Marcus watched her quietly, sensing the subtle shift. She was letting herself breathe again, just a little. And he knew. The storm outside was still there, but inside these walls, for now, she could feel safe. After breakfast, Marcus led her to a corner of the apartment filled with neatly stacked files and a couple of computers. "This is my work," he said, sitting down at a desk. "I help people who've been taken advantage of, manipulated, or threatened. Call it an unofficial investigation service." Alina's eyes widened. You investigate people?" Marcus nodded, swiveling slightly in his chair. "I look for facts, patterns, proof. Sometimes it's about protecting someone. Sometimes it's about exposing someone. And yes, it can get dangerous." She hesitated, glancing around at the room filled with dossiers and surveillance photographs. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Marcus said seriously, "you deserve to know. You're not safe with him. And if you want, I can help you make sure you never have to be." Alina swallowed hard. The thought of finally having someone in her corner, someone who could see through the lies and manipulations she'd endured, made her chest tighten. Fear, yes, but also a spark of hope. "And you trust me?" she asked softly. Marcus met her gaze. "You don't have to trust me yet. You just have to trust that I won't let you get hurt." Over the next few days, Alina and Marcus worked together. They sifted through emails, scanned social media accounts, traced financial transactions, and cross-referenced documents. Every night, Marcus would explain a detail, teach her how to read between the lines, and gradually, Alina began to see the truth. It was meticulous, exhausting work. But with each revelation, her anger and clarity grew. She saw patterns of manipulation, control, and deceit in ways she never had before. Every false promise, every cruel word her fiancé had used to belittle her became undeniable proof of his toxic behavior. Alina found herself growing more confident, her voice stronger, her judgment sharper. And every time Marcus noticed her, progress. He gave a quiet nod of approval. No one had ever guided her without trying to control her. No one had ever treated her intelligence as a weapon rather than a weakness. They celebrated small victories. A critical document verified, a hidden account discovered, an email that exposed another lie. Each success brought them closer, not just as allies, but as two people learning to trust again. It was late one night when Marcus handed Alina a final folder. Inside were documents, contracts, and bank statements, evidence she could use to protect herself legally. As she skimmed through, a name caught her eye. Her breath caught. She looked, up at Marcus, heart racing. This isn't possible." Marcus's expression was calm, almost knowing. "Go ahead. Look closer." Alina scanned again. The numbers, the accounts, the holdings, it all added up. Marcus wasn't just any man helping her out of kindness. He was a billionaire, quietly wealthy, living modestly while doing work that helped people like her. She closed the folder slowly, trying to process it. All this? You could have anyone, live anywhere. Why, why help me? Marcus leaned back, a soft smile on his face. Because some things aren't about money. Some things are about doing what's right. Tonight, you get to see what real kindness looks like. Alina felt tears prick her eyes. Shock, disbelief, and something else. Gratitude, awe, maybe even a spark of something deeper, flooded her. In the span of a few nights, her world had shifted completely. The man she thought was a stranger had become her protector, her guide, and perhaps the one person she could finally trust completely. The sound of screeching tires cut through the night, followed by a heavy knock that shook the safe-house door. Alina's heart pounded as she backed into the corner, clutching the blanket tighter around her. Before she could react, the door burst open, and Marcus appeared like a force of nature. His presence filled the room with a tense energy, every movement precise, controlled, and purposeful. "Alina!" he shouted, scanning the scene. The intruders froze for a split second, giving her a small, fleeting moment of hope. Marcus didn't hesitate. He disarmed one of the men with rapid efficiency, slamming him against the wall. The other two paused, uncertainty flickering across their faces as Trey's weapon kept them in check. Alina's fear began to ebb slightly as she realized Marcus had everything under control. His eyes, dark and unwavering, locked onto hers for a brief moment. "You're safe," he said, voice steady, commanding. "Stay behind me." For the first time that night, Alina believed it. Marcus had arrived just in time, and the storm that had threatened to engulf her seemed momentarily held at bay. Trey, standing slightly behind Marcus, leveled his firearm with calm precision. His eyes were sharp, trained, and unwavering as he aimed at the remaining intruders. The tension in the room was palpable, a taut line that threatened to snap with the slightest movement. "Not a good idea," Trey said coldly, his tone measured but lethal. "Step back." The men hesitated, unsure if they should advance or retreat. Every second stretched, heavy with the potential for violence. Marcus moved like a shadow, controlling the space between danger and Alina, his body shielding her as though she were the most valuable thing in the world. Alina watched silently, her hands trembling, but a sliver of hope anchored her. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. Between Marcus's courage and Trey's steady aim, the threat that had haunted her for months began to crumble. Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air as police cars screeched to a halt outside. Officers rushed inside, taking control of the scene. David, stunned and flustered, found himself handcuffed in front of the very people he had sought to intimidate. Alina watched, wide-eyed, as the man who had haunted her life for so long was finally subdued. Shock and disbelief washed over her. Could it really be over? Marcus stayed by her side, his presence steady, grounding her amidst the chaos. "It's over," he whispered gently. Alina's body sagged with relief as tears streamed down her face. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of fear lift. The sight of David being led away was almost surreal. Every threat, every manipulation, every moment of terror had finally met a reckoning. And Alina could breathe again. Alina collapsed into Marcus's arms, sobs racking her body as years of fear, tension, and pain poured out of her. He held her firmly, a steady presence that allowed her to release everything she had been holding in. "Shh. It's okay," Marcus murmured, his voice calm and reassuring. "You're safe now. No one can hurt you." For a long moment she clung to him, drawing strength from the quiet, unwavering support he offered. The tears weren't just of relief, they were a catharsis, a cleansing of all the shadows that had plagued her life. As her sobs slowed, Alina finally lifted her face, meeting Marcus's eyes. There was gratitude, awe, and a fragile, newfound hope shining through the exhaustion. The man she had come to rely on, the protector who had appeared in her darkest moment, was now the anchor she never knew she needed. Weeks later, Alina found herself seated in a packed courtroom. David stood before the judge, his smug demeanor replaced by unease as the evidence Trey and Marcus had gathered was presented. Every document, every testimony, and every recorded threat formed an unassailable case. Alina's hands were clasped tightly together, her eyes fixed on the man who had tormented her life. The room was tense, heavy with anticipation, as the jury absorbed the weight of the truth. When the gavel finally fell and David was sentenced, relief washed over her in a tidal wave. Justice had been served. The nightmare that had dominated her life was ending, and she could finally begin to breathe freely again. Marcus sat beside her, offering quiet support. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough. The courtroom, once a place of fear, had transformed into a sanctuary of resolution. In the weeks that followed, Alina began reclaiming her life. She volunteered at a local women's shelter, sharing her story with courage and compassion. Faces lit up as she connected with others who had endured similar pain, and each smile reminded her of the power of resilience. Marcus remained by her side, quietly guiding her through therapy appointments, interviews, and moments of doubt. Together, they navigated the slow, steady process of healing. Day by day, Alina's confidence grew. She laughed more freely, spoke with more strength, and allowed herself to dream again. The darkness that had once defined her existence was slowly replaced by warmth, connection, and a sense of purpose. One evening, Alina and Marcus stood on a quiet rooftop, overlooking the glowing city below. The air was crisp, carrying the soft hum of traffic, and the skyline stretched endlessly before them. "I don't even know how to thank you," Alina murmured, her eyes glistening as she looked at him. Marcus shook his head gently. "You don't have to. You saved yourself. I was just there to help." They held hands, fingers intertwining, sharing a quiet, profound connection forged through fear, courage, and trust. For the first time in years, Alina felt a sense of peace. Hope wasn't just a dream. It was tangible, present, and real. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Alina and Marcus stood together, silhouetted against the warm, golden light. Their shared gaze was one of quiet strength, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. From that day forward, Alina's life transformed. She became a voice for those trapped in cycles of abuse, inspiring others with her courage. Marcus stayed by her side, not as a savior, but as a partner, building a life grounded in trust, respect, and mutual support. David's reign of fear had ended, and the city itself seemed to breathe anew. Alina's story became a testament to resilience, proof that even in the darkest moments, light could always find its way through.